Hello, I'm Andrew Nichols. Welcome to The Rundown. Also in Ottawa, Peter Sloly, the former Ottawa police chief, has spent a second day speaking before the public inquiry into the use of the Federal Emergencies Act. Sloly is being asked about the force's handling of the anti-mandate convoy that paralyzed his city. That includes a question earlier today about the challenges of getting tow trucks to remove the heavy trucks blocking downtown streets.
In the February 9th plan, there's specific reference to the fact that tow truck operators were receiving hundreds of threats, and some of them death threats. Is that your recollection?
Not necessarily from the February 9th plan, but that was really just the state of affairs from the middle of the first week throughout. At one point, I think even Commissioner Lucky, I don't think she was flippant about it, but they were looking at Kijiji to find heavy tow trucks in Canada.
The CBC's Catherine Cullen is at the inquiry. She is, of course, host of The House on CBC Radio, and she joins us live in Ottawa. So, Catherine, that was just one of many moments today that really caught our attention. There was also some quite, as I think you used the word, acrimonious exchanges, heated exchanges. What else did we hear?
Well, interestingly enough, Bill Blair's name also coming up just in the last few minutes at this inquiry, something I'm sure he's not especially delighted about a bit of a difficult day for Mr. Blair. In some of the back and forth that we saw for the lawyer for the Canadian Constitution Foundation asking Peter Sloly essentially about some procedural issues that came up, whether or not Minister Blair had indeed suggested that there was a whole process that Peter Sloly had to go through when he was chief of the Ottawa Police Service in order to get additional officers, because of course we know that's one of the main points of tension in all of this, Andrew. Also, another interesting moment that just came up a few minutes ago in the course of the testimony, Peter Sloly was asked about a conversation that he had with multiple levels of government, and he talked specifically about comments by a Deputy Minister for Public Safety, Deputy Minister Stewart, who said, according to Peter Sloly, that the Ottawa Police Service seems to want to keep a group of extremists and white supremacists to allow them to take over Ottawa, allow them to take over Wellington Street right in front of the Parliament buildings. And Peter Sloly really did want to take a moment to take great exception to that, talk about how offensive he found that particular comment, his recollection of it. Andrew, so much ground to cover, a lot of threads to pull on today. And another interesting moment that has come up has been this discussion about the extent to which the Ottawa Police Service, when Peter Sloly was in charge, was being swayed by public opinion. At one point, they took a moment to look at a service that the police service had hired. We know that they had hired Navigator PR, a crisis communications firm, but also another group called ASI that looked at public sentiment to sort of get a sense of how people were feeling. And Peter Sloly weighed in on some information that was put in front of him after there had been an unsuccessful attempt to shut down a protest in Coutts, Alberta. Some public opinion polling here in Ottawa looking at that. So let's listen to a bit of that exchange.
If you were to take an Alberta-type action, you would get a 10% lift in public opinion from Centretown residents because they're happy you took action. But you would take a 50% hit from residents in other parts of the city who are currently not expressing any concern with the situation. If things went south, like in Alberta, then they would blame the Ottawa police for the misstep. So why would it matter what the sentiment indicators were for residents unaffected by and unconcerned about the Freedom Convoy?
It really didn't matter to me at this point, to be honest. I'd already had my meeting on February 1st in Canada with the public order commanders. The level of effort that we would have to have, the scale would be, as I said, somewhere between the 700 range to the 1,000 plus range to even begin to contemplate an operation that happened in Coutts. So, I mean, I don't want to say it was too little too late. Whatever modeling was taking place here, it really was immaterial. The situation in here just required a scale that we couldn't contemplate a similar operation.
And this was a bit of a recurring theme today, Andrew, where Peter Sloly was asked about communications advice that he received with the implicit suggestion, it seemed, that he was worried about public opinion or worried about his own reputation. Whenever these suggestions were raised, former police chief Peter Sloly simply said, that's not the case. That's not what I was concerned about. Perhaps this information crossed my desk, but that doesn't mean that it was top of mind.
So let's zero in on a bit of the earlier question by the lawyer for the Ottawa Police Services. You know, he was the chief of the Ottawa Police Services, and it was particularly heated and testy. What did we hear of significance?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one thing to think about in all of this, Andrew, right? This is a commission of public inquiry. It isn't a trial. And yet it did seem, frankly, quite, while always polite, really a sense of combativeness between Mr. Sloly and the lawyer for the Ottawa Police Service. The lawyer for the Ottawa Police Service pulling up page after page of mostly handwritten notes saying, look, this particular person below you suggested in this meeting that you were curt, that you were upset, that you made some angry comments. And Police Chief Sloly saying over and over again, I don't understand where that characterization comes from. That is not how I thought about this particular issue. I'm not quite sure why that would be perceived that way. Let's listen to a little sample.
I testified that the trust factor had taken a hit, but that I had not lost confidence in my two deputies. If I had lost confidence in my two deputies, I would have taken a much more firm and direct course of action.
Okay. And so you lost trust, and that must have been very hard.
I lost some level of trust, sir. Thank you.
And that must have been very hard for you.
I think that's hard for anybody, sir.
And again, this was where it was during that couple hours of exchange this morning where this idea that Peter Sloly had, for instance, received a report from that crisis communications firm Navigator that looked at calls for him to resign, some information about his reputation with the suggestion that that is what was preoccupying him. Again, time and time again, we heard from Peter Sloly that was not the case. He was trying to help the citizens of Ottawa. He was concerned about his officers. He says he was not concerned about trying to manage his own reputation or public perception around all of this. Andrew?
Catherine, thank you. The CBC's Catherine Cullen, host of The House, joining us live from Ottawa.